Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to Avon Fire Authority's People and Culture meeting today, the 17th of September. I'm opening this meeting today as the clerk to Avon Fire Authority because the first item would normally be the election of the chair for the municipal year. At the last meeting on the 17th of June, it was covered that we would be appointing a new chair today, so that was intended. We have, with the help of the political leaders, identified who the chair is going to be following the elections, and that's Councillor David Wilcox. So he's very kindly offered to be the chair of this committee. Unfortunately, when he accepted that appointment, he'd already booked a holiday, which is why he can't be with us today. So we've agreed that Councillor Brenda Massey, who's the overall chair of the Fire Authorities, very kindly agreed to stand in today and cover and be the chair for today's committee meeting. So without further ado, I will hand over to Councillor Massey. Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you, and welcome to the first meeting of this year on the People and Culture Committee meeting. And I have apologies for absence so far from Councillors Brown, Davies,
Bromley,
Bromley, Davies, Hopkinson, Wilcox. And item 3 on the agenda is the emergency evacuation procedures.
So the emergency evacuation procedures for the headquarters buildings, we're not expecting any routine alarms this afternoon. So if you hear anything, we go downstairs, out the main entrance and across the road to the car park.
Yeah, 2 entrances out the room, one behind you, chair, and one in front of you as well. Both will lead to exits outside the building.
Thank you. Item 4 on the agenda is the declaration of interest. I don't think we've received any declarations
No,
of interest.
none received.
Right.
Sorry, chair, for me, I declare an interest in item 14.
Thank you. Item 5 is Chair's business, and this is just to confirm that this meeting of the People and Culture Committee is taking place as a face-to-face meeting. Unfortunately, due to COVID-19 restrictions, we've had to limit the number of attendees and the entry of the press and public. But for this reason, we are recording this meeting for the public to view, whereas before COVID, committee meetings were not recorded. So I'd like to go around the room and ask the members to introduce themselves for the benefit of the members of the public who are watching. So I'll start.
So, Councillor Ryan Brown from Bristol City Council, representing Tingle and Butchers Park Ward.
I'm Councillor Brenda Massey, I'm Chair of the Fire Authority, and I also represent South Queens and Bristol as well.
Ruth Jacobs, I'm Councillor for North Somerset, and my ward is Wixon, Lawrence and St George's.
And Richard Tucker, North Somerset Council, Western-super-Mare of Milton Ward.
And I'm Adam Monk, I'm a South Gloss Councillor, my ward is Filton.
Right, thank you. So the item 6 on the agenda.
So just the officers to introduce themselves. So
Yes.
I am Amanda Brown, the clerk to the Fire Authority.
Simon Shelton, Assistant Chief Fire Officer, Avon Fire and Rescue.
Steve Murphy, Bristol City Council.
Thank you.
Right, so item 6, we have the minutes of the ordinary committee meeting of the People and Culture Committee held on the 17th of June 2021. And I'd like to move those as a correct record. Is everybody happy with that? Yes?
Is that Richard seconding?
Yeah?
2.
Thank you, Richard. So, okay, all happy?
Can I just make one comment on the minutes, which is that you had at the last meeting an injury settlements paper, and one of the resolutions was that a further paper would be brought back to you, and that will be brought back to you today. You'll notice at item 10, so you're getting the further report as promised.
Thank you. So the next item on the agenda, public access rather, on item 7 we have received no public access.
Yeah, we have.
Item 8 is the cultural survey update 2021, and I believe it says Richard Stokes is to
Yes, Chair, I'm not going to get Richard, that's fine. Richard will be presenting next item and the following item as well.
Yes. And item regulatory.
You can take your mask off now, Richard.
The first item for me will be the culture survey. So we launched a culture survey back in June this year. We did quite a big comms campaign across the organisation. Did a short video as well to present the second culture survey. And corporate communications also consistently put out comms to let me know it was available and to participate. Overall, we got a 35% response rate. That's about 298 questions completed, which is quite a difference since the last culture survey, which was about 70-80% response rate. However, the questions that we reviewed for this one did reflect some questions and certainly kept in line with the themes that came out in the first culture survey. We thought it was important to compare change or monitor change since the last one. The overall outcome of the survey, we've got a draft copy, and the final report will be early next week. There has been a lot of increases in responses, positive responses since the last survey. For example, there's been a 17% increase in the agreement for services moving in a positive direction with culture change since the last survey, and 12% increase in those that agree that SLT listen to what they have to say. There are some trends that came out as well. So we've noticed that there's a tendency for more negative responses from staff with over 10 years service as in comparison to those with under 10 years service. And there's been a lot of positive responses from female staff as well across a broad area of questions. However, there has been a decrease in the feeling that, there's been a decrease in feeling that people are not included in social events. We can probably align that to the pandemic and the lockdown situation. That was quite a big decrease of 21% over the last survey. There also has been a decrease in confidence around fairness around career progression. 8% decrease in the feeling that colleagues, staff get the same chance as colleagues to progress or be promoted. But overall, in my perception, there has been a positive increase in percentage points since 2018. And I think that indicates that the culture change programme has made some progress in particular areas, especially around management, middle management. There's been a lot of increases in agreement that middle managers do what they say they're going to do, can promote flexible working, There is, however, some indication that there is more work to do around people's perception about SLT, that they listen to staff and senior managers in general, that there is some more development work there to increase the confidence in the staff. So, as I mentioned, we've got a draft version of it, which we've done some analysis, and we've also gone back to ORS, the suppliers, and had a meeting with them just to sort of go through the draft and fine-tune it before the final report is released. I've gone through it quite extensively myself, and I will say that overall I do think there's been some major improvements. There are some areas that obviously still need to change and for us to work on. Some of those themes, command and control. I think there's been improvement in there. There is more work to do around that. Bullying and harassment and grievance. There's quite a high percentage there that it said that they had been or witnessed bullying and harassment in the last 2 years. So there's plenty of work to do there as well. But I am confident that having gone through the draft survey itself, there are lots of initiatives that were already in place that are addressing some of those key issues, so we will continue to work on those. And some new ideas and new initiatives that we want to develop as well, which will also help with some of the key areas that need work on. So, as I said before, I think that it does go to show that since the change programme has been launched and the initiatives that we've put in place, we are starting to see slow progression.
Thank you.
If I may, Chair, just to put some further context into Richard's paper there. The survey, in terms of the centre checking survey that Richard mentioned, that's not about the data. The data is what it is in terms of the responses. It's more around the narrative, so it can be interpreted correctly with regards to the data and what staff are telling us. Of course, with a cultural journey, it's an ongoing requirement for improvement and listening. And as Richard referenced there, it's important also to recognise that we are making some positive inroads, but there is still some work to do. Our next steps will be that the information that we receive through our survey will then influence a refresh of the document making Avon Fire and Rescue Service a better place to work. So that was set from the original cultural survey that we put. We've now gone out to our workforce and say, how are we doing? What's your feeling? Are we committing to what we're or are we doing what we're committing to? And then, as I said, we will refresh that policy, distribute that against our policy, that direction of travel, if you like, redistribute that around the organisation, and again demonstrate that commitment to making that difference based on the feedback that we're receiving.
I've just got a few questions and I'll get them back from everybody else. How many years have you actually been doing this survey?
Me personally?
Well,
the
the survey's been run.
So the first survey was 2018, and it was a different supplier. That was the glass lift. Unfortunately, we tried to contact them to do this survey for us. The idea from the first survey was that we would do the rerun to capture the last 24 months. They've actually gone out of business, so I searched for another organisation. This one, ORS, has 30 years experience in working with FOSs, which is part of the reason why I chose them. They're very thorough about what they do as well.
Okay. And how many questions are there in total?
So it's 9 topics. There's 298 questions altogether, and that was over 9 specific topics.
I think that was 298 questionnaires, not questions. I completed the survey myself and it was nowhere near 298 questions.
Might have produced.
Yeah, that would have been a bit too long to...
Yes,
so maybe we
it does
don't
say
know.
298
Questionnaires were completed myself.
And do you have a free text box?
Yes, there are some questions that have free text. multiple choices, and with the food taste, that's quite a key area, because obviously that gives the participant a chance to sort of go into more detail about particular areas which we do a lot of focus on.
I'm sorry to ask this, but I've got quite a bit of experience in doing something in a large organisation, so just that. Okay, I'll open it for anybody else. Any questions? Richard?
Thanks, Brenda. Yeah, thank you very much, Rich. I think I picked up on, did you say that people that have been here more than about 10 years gave slightly sort of less negative, more negative response? I suppose that comes with a bit of confidence. Once you've got your feet under the table, you feel you can speak a bit more freely, I suppose. What's your sort of take on that, beyond that then, in terms of, do you sort of notice any other patterns with the more long-serving ones as to why they might have been a bit more outspoken or negative?
Sure. I mean, obviously, there's further analysis, a lot of further analysis still on it, and my immediate thoughts around it would be that those with 10 years or more service are part of the staff group that was in that period that preceded the first culture survey. So there may be, without sort of being able to break it down to particular areas, whether operational or particular stations, there's a possibility that some people's mindsets are still back in 10, 15 years ago when things were happening. And maybe with corporate services where it's more or less the epicenter of change, that takes time to filter down to the stations and other areas. So to those that are in those particular areas, they may think things haven't changed. But we will be going to stations to get a better understanding about the culture there. What we're talking about really is about cultures within cultures, and some that are not identifiable to people like myself who work here. But until you go down to the station and talk to firefighters, they will tell you there are cultures within cultures. Some will be manageable, and some will be so small that still have a kind of impact. So that's one sort of theory. If you compare that to the staff under 10 years, they've come into an organisation now, or certainly in the last 24 months, where they can see clear, visible attempts to change the culture. For example, our values or behaviour framework, some of the training that we've done, the We Are One talks, where we've brought in inspirational speakers to talk about topics that usually haven't been talked about, menopause or mental health or neurodiversity. So they've come in, seeing more enthusiasm, probably a raising of morale as well. I guess there's also an element of age group and maybe generation as well, where in society they've come from a changing society where things are talked about more. So that would be something to do with it as well. But again, until we sort of analyse it more deeper, we'll share those findings.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Malcolm.
So I had a couple of questions which I think you've answered some of them. So one of my questions was, will the analysis be done how you break this down to either job types or stations? But you did refer to that because obviously, I don't know, but there could be silos of issues, couldn't there? So I think you've answered that. But then my other question is that I understand the authority is on a journey and that journey is a never-ending journey. But was there anything within the survey that raised a major red flag that the leadership team thought there was progress being made, but the survey would tell you that the perception is there isn't progress being made?
So I think career progression would be one of those key areas. We are doing a lot of work on that. For example, promotion policy is currently being a policy of access to look for any adverse impacts, any sort of disparities there. So that is being addressed. I guess at the time that people completed the survey, that the changes in the process for change were taking place, so they wouldn't have been aware of that.
Mhm.
And again, as I sort of said, if you're thinking about sort of stations away from HQ, it will take a while for you to communicate what you're doing on that, and then the end results may not be seen for another 12, 15 months or whatever. So that's certainly one key area there. I mentioned also earlier about SLT and senior management in general. I think there is quite a significant response there that senior management are not living the values and presenting them in their roles. That will need further analysis also. I know, for example, we've done a number of development sessions over the last 12 months with SLT, with via SARI. Just a couple of weeks ago, neurodiversity with an external supplier. So I think there's some time lag difference there with, we are doing that development, we are raising awareness, but it will take time to show, I guess, to all staff.
My professional assessment is there's some legacy behaviours as well that maybe stick in people's memory and recollection. The promotion process is always an interesting one because we've tweaked and listened to staff over the last 2 or 3 years to make changes, and we've made 2 or 3 changes over that period of time. But it's always an emotive topic, promotion and career progression. There are those that are successful and think everything's great. Those that are less successful might think that's, it's a challenge in terms of the process itself. Nevertheless, that said, we have listened quite considerably to the feedback that our staff have been given and trying to respond to that. And as you said, Councillor, around it's a journey, a never-ending journey. And I think the key thing is we need to be open-minded to continue to listen to the feedback that we're getting and respond accordingly, which I'm hoping that the positives that come out of the survey themselves will demonstrate that. Of course, though, there are always going to be more work that we need to think about and to focus on, and that's why these surveys are incredibly important to us, so we can consider, review, analyse. And to answer your question, Councillor, around can we identify cohorts of staff? Absolutely. It breaks it down into gender, into age groups, into locations, not down to individual level. The idea is not to identify individuals, because it's not about that. But certainly, if we've got a particular area that we need to focus on, just one section of the organisation, rather than tar-brushing everybody with the same thought process, we can do some targeted approach and development in those areas. Absolutely.
Did you say that the approach due to be published next week?
And we'll get the final report next week from OOS, and then it will be published after that. What we've got planned in the diary is we've got a cultural change working group, which is a cross-section of different staff from across the organisation, different sort of seniority levels as well. I'd like to give that group a chance to look at the report and have some discussions about what they will see from it, because that will be a working group that will be putting measures in place or conducting focus groups, which is also one after from ORS as well. So in these sort of key areas of negatives, you're aware there's been a decrease in agreements to particular statements. There's an option to do focus groups there. But equally, I also want to do some focus groups on some of the positive changes that we've made where we can see some increases, so we can understand why that has sort of taken place and obviously continue to bolster that going forward.
So members, I imagine the final report will be coming before members at their next meeting.
Yes.
Now, I'm conscious that's not until December. So maybe, rather than have an extraordinary meeting, because I know everybody's diaries are very busy, maybe what we can do is contact all the members of People and Culture and offer to share with them the report in advance of that meeting, so that you can see it before December if you'd like to. Okay, I think that's a pragmatic approach, otherwise it's going to be a bit of a time lag.
It's too long.
It's just the timing of this meeting has just fallen 1 week too soon for the publication of final reports. So, okay. So, any other questions from members, please?
I think I've only got one final one. Do you sense check questions? And, do you get different people to look at the questions? Because sometimes some people can read them one way and others see them differently.
As we were developing them,
Yes.
yes, we did that. We spent quite a considerable amount of time with that culture working group, and we also included some other staff members as well, so sure it was diversity in terms of thinking and also representation as well. Yes, we really sort of work hard at designing those questions so we can get those full answers and get those comparisons.
Because it's quite easy, something makes perfect sense to you and somebody else takes it in a completely different way. So, yeah, that's
Just one thing to note also that ORS has informed us that there was a significant proportion of people that actually partially filled the questionnaire. And one of the key areas that there was certainly some reluctance to fill in was the personal information in terms of sort of protected characteristics and identification there. There was reluctance there to do that, so we have to take that into account also.
That's interesting. I can understand why some people would not want to share that information, but then from the point of view of what you're trying to achieve from the survey,
Used for positive purposes.
your hands are slightly tied down to understand, to identify. Is there a cable not feeling?
It may be something as simple as a suspicion that if I'm in a minority group and I disclose I am, I'm sort of identifying myself. It might be as simple as that.
And we do have numbers, we do have some protected characteristics where numbers are so low that it would be quite easy to identify. Outside of culture change and culture survey, there is a general mistrust about diversity monitoring forms, sharing information across the board anyway. And that's something that we're trying to work on. It's not really easy if somebody doesn't want to give their personal details for whatever reason, it's their prerogative. We have to work with what we get.
Suspicious society these days, aren't we?
So maybe consideration might be given to more anonymity in that, in some ways. It's probably an ongoing discussion, so
We
I'd
did.
quite like to pick it up with you as someone.
Sure. We did make, in our comms, initial sort of comms campaign, we did, Avon Fire Rescue Service and ORS did provide statements throughout to say, confidentiality is paramount, and it's going to be also taken very, very seriously in that campaign before and also digital as well. So.
I think one of the issues is, as you said, if you've got a very small number of people who they're going to be worried regardless of who they are. Okay, thank you for that. I look forward to doing it. Moving on now to
So, recommendations are to note progress to date to launch and completion of the second culture survey. You might want to add to that and to be presented with the full report at the next meeting for our minutes, if we could just add that to the recommendations and to be presented with the final report at the next meeting.
Thank you.
So, are you going to propose that?
Oh, sorry. Yes, no, I'll propose it.
I'll second it. Oh, sorry.
Okay. Anybody abstaining or against? No? Everybody's happy. Thank you.
Richard, you've got the next item as well, which is item 9, Dice Strategy 2019 to 22 and Cultural Change Update.
So the DICE strategy is currently under review, mainly because we really have moved on in terms of when it was first produced. some of the objectives that we've been working on within the document. Having a look at it now, there are lots of changes that we would like to make to ensure that we are achieving the work. So some of the changes that we are going to propose are based around consultations with particular departments, for example, risk reduction. Home safety visits, community engagement. We want to ensure that DICE supports those departments so that those community-facing areas of the organisation are aware of those in our community, their needs, especially around vulnerable adults and children and young people. So we want to improve the way that we provide data for those departments, demographic data, work with community organisations and partners for business fire safety, raising awareness of social issues for particular community groups. That's one particular area we're looking to update. We've done a lot of work around policy over the last 15, 18 months with the transformation team, and having a look at with our strategy and that policy and objective, we make a lot of changes. So in terms of the quality impact assessment and the process there, we're updating that process. A lot of work around policy, making them into more manageable guidance documents. These changes that have happened in sort of the last 15 months, we need to be able to reflect in the DICE strategy and move that objective forward to make it more effective. Again, with community engagement, we've achieved quite a lot there, especially through SARI and the work we've been doing in terms of development SRT members. Some key areas with risk reduction in terms of smoke groups. So following the Grenfell Tower incident, we report there and recommendations. We work closely with SARI to understand some of the barriers that could be faced by community groups when it comes to road smoke groups. The kind of apparatus that we would evacuate high-rise buildings, people from high-rise buildings. So again, we want to reflect that in the DICE strategy and ensure that type of work is continued and spread across other sort of key community organisations. And obviously with the culture survey that we've just done, in the current DICE strategy, we said we will run a second culture survey. We've done that as well, so obviously we want to update that. And the findings that we glean from that culture survey we will also reflect in terms of the work going forward, those things like the focus groups and the initiatives we've got in place, like internet going so right. So yeah, we'll get a general overhaul and we'll present that to people in the culture committee for approval, and then that will be launched and published by 2020.
Thank you. Comments, questions?
Chair, at the last meeting you asked for an update on our menopause and the work we've done around supporting the colleagues who are going through the menopause. Which I don't know if you want to just give members an update of some of the work we've done there, shall we say?
When I came to the organisation in 2018, we were working collaboratively with Talking Menopause and Avon Fire Authority, delivering conferences for both sort of staff groups here at HQ. The pandemic then came in and we couldn't do the face-to-face conferences anymore, and there was a bit of a gap there. Since things have eased up with the understand how we can continue to raise awareness. So we've had a We Are One talk, where we invited Talking Menopause to come in and raise awareness further in the organisation. And we are continuing to talk with Menopause about possible support and training packages for staff. So that work is continuing there. We're also talking with Devon and Cornwall Fire Rescue Service, that they've done some quite extensive work on menopause. And there's a possibility that we can collaborate with Devon and Cornwall to deliver packages through talking menopause and potentially sharing costs as well. There is also a draft of a menopause policy that we going to issue in the next sort of 6 to 12 months as well.
We've issued managers' guidance, also on one page, on a bit of a flow chart that we helped to develop with Talking Menopause and other colleagues around on a national level. And also talking with and engaging with our female members of staff who have experienced or gone through menopause around the changes we can make to our uniform and how we can support colleagues through the materials as an example. So one such example of that would be the firefighters t-shirts, they're red cotton t-shirts, and sometimes they're very difficult for ventilation of the body and moderating body temperature. And so we've now sourced and supplied an alternative material, so it's a choice there for staff to choose. One is a wicking material, so it allows the body to ventilate a little bit more, and wherever possible moderate the body temperature, change the body temperature. So there's a choice there for individuals, as well as simple things like being able to relax a fire tuning. Fire tunings are designed in a particular way, but something simple of that nature, certainly for our operational female firefighters, having some flexibility on the fire ground, where it's appropriate to do so is take off their jacket and do another task or go and take some rest for a period of time. So things like that are part of the guidance that we've issued for managers. And also, if you're office-based, things like the supply of a fan, as an example, a window, a desk close to a window, just some simple tips. It sounds quite low level, but that's very helpful for managers who may not necessarily be used to supporting a colleague who may be experiencing the menopause. And as Richard said there, the ongoing work we're doing with Talking Menopause with further development and further training sessions for staff and not just managers but all colleagues across the service, both male and female. We've had quite a big uptake in initial stages of both male and female colleagues going through that awareness sessions.
Yes, I wanted to ask, when it's talking about your action plan, it says that you remove the prerequisite of having driving licences. Has it made a difference?
We're monitoring the...
Has it?
We're monitoring it at the moment. I think since we removed it, we've had one...
I can give you an exact number. Of the 49 that have passed the most recent recruits, only one of them has been successful who hasn't got a driving licence. It didn't attract a huge amount of numbers of applicants that didn't have an initial driving licence or only had a provisional driving licence. What we hope that will achieve, though, eventually, we sort of made the decision later on in the recruitment process, so we'll probably get a better indication in the next recruitment process. But what we're hoping that will achieve is certainly from those members of our community who would like to try and join the fire service and apply to join from a lower social economic background, may not have been in a position to be able to afford driving licences. So we took the decision to remove that as a criteria for a full driving licence, but put it into the training and development. So it will be a conditional appointment on the basis that when they become employed, they'll be earning a salary, they'll be able to afford driving lessons, with the view that towards the latter part of their training, their aim is to achieve a full driving licence, because part of the firefighter rollback, I think Chair Reid spoke yesterday, didn't we, about it, is around moving and driving fire service vehicles.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor.
So-
So I'm just conscious of Councillor Muntz on the...
I know,
My question was just around the T-shirt, so I did pick that up, but I can't now find the paragraph. And I'm sure it's more my perception. So it says something about there's a T-shirt, but I'm assuming that T-shirt is available to male and female stuff. It's
It
not
is.
single, because the way I read it sounded like we were singling people.
No, it's open to all staff as a choice now, personal choice, depending on
It
their
just-
preference.
It's whatever.
Yes.
Thanks, Brenda. Yeah, thank you, Rich. I caught at the start, you mentioned that we were getting new demographic data, or there was a need for improvement to feed into the department. Is that because we've just basically accumulated more and more refined and more detailed demographic, or just that more up to date?
External demographics?
Yeah.
External demographics, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, next year we'll get the census reports, because we've been working with a decade of data and making decisions on that. That's quite difficult really to sort of be accurate. I think with the 2022 census results, it will be quite revealing. I think there's been a lot of increases in diversity in Bristol and probably the surrounding areas as well. There's been a lot of movement outside there, sort of moving out of Bristol to South Portishead, North Somerset as well, but particular groups, baby groups in particular as well. Sort of usual areas like St Paul's, Easton, Lawrence Hill. Certain St Paul's and Easton are changing to what we St Paul's the most, become quite gentrified and merging into sort of town. You can actually see going down there very visible changes there. So it would be quite interesting to see where people have started to move, and then that gives us scope then for providing even better service for those other areas we wouldn't normally sort of consider as being highly diverse in terms of recruitment and people with vulnerable adults and things like that. So we look forward to that data, and then obviously we can then update our own data and make sure that's available to all managers and everything else who needs it.
Interesting to see what comes out, particularly with regards to changes in Avon and Western and Whiteham. You see changes, all the aspects that you mentioned there. Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Brenda.
Anything else? If you do want to ask a question, use the wave it's quite difficult with configuration of the tables. So, thank you very much, Richard.
So on the report, your committee is asked to note the content of the report on the DICE strategy and note the content of the report for the culture change programme. So you're just noting this report.
That's fine.
Sorry, Chair, with your permission, and also the class permission, could I make a suggestion? Richard is also due to present item 11 on the agenda.
I was thinking,
And
and
I
it
mean-
makes a lot more sense
yes.
to take it now. I noticed it on the agenda a few minutes ago.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
And also, Stacey can do her two together.
Yes, thanks,
Makes a lot
Chair.
more sense, yeah. So, Richard, would you like to jump to item 11?
So each year we are required as a public body to monitor our pay graphs for gender. More recently, the FS pay gap has been introduced as well. The difference with those two is that we have to publish our gender pay gap, but there isn't at the moment a requirement to publish our ethnicity pay gap. For the purpose of this meeting, I'll report on the gender pay gap. I'm pleased to say that from last year there's been a significant decrease in the gap from 4.48% to 0.07%. Because we have just recently So these figures are based on March 31st. We haven't analysed why that drop has occurred. However, I can point out that there are some possibilities. For example, since the last report, there has been 4 female staff, senior staff, employed, which may have made a difference. There have been a percentage of people that have left the organisation and people coming into the organisation as well. And also some of the initiatives that we developed for culture change, for example, some development courses, Springboard, Spring Forward, may have also encouraged more female staff to step up and apply for more senior positions. We will be, myself and finance will be going further into detail and analysing the figures to try and explain why why we've seen that significant increase in the gap. But it is positive. The pandemic also had an impact on all organisations. For example, we weren't required to report in March and publish in March, and so we were given till October to do that. So I looked at the national figures, and at the moment there isn't a national report or a national figure at the moment because of that delay. So I can't compare it against that, but it certainly has been a significant problem.
Jack, can I just check, because I think there might be a couple of stray typos in this report, and it's certainly not Richard Stone's fault. I think it was in the process of it being put in for publication. So on page 42 of your bundle, paragraph 5.2, so page 42 of the bundle, paragraph 5.2, you'll see there's a section which says that our future reporting dates are as follows. Now it should say, for both bullet points, snapshot date of 31st of March. The first one is snapshot date of 31st of March 20, and the second one should be snapshot date of 31st of March 21. I think the word August might have crept in there rather than March. Or have you got March?
Have you got August?
You've got August. So that August, for the second bullet point, should be replaced with March. And the same applies to paragraph 5.4, where it says the pay gap between men and women in Avon Fire Authority service as of, that should be the snapshot date again, which is 31st of March 21, has fallen from 0.7 to 4.48. I think the confusion here, and it's an easy one to do, is the regulations which require us to do this, so you publicise data relating to one date in time. That's called a snapshot date, and that's the 31st of March each year. But you then have a year to publish your report. And although you'll see on the report, not the first appendix, but the second appendix, the report for this year, 2021, we put the date of publication as 31st of August. In fact, I suggest that also on page 49 of the bundle is changed to the 20th of September, which is Monday. And that's the date we're publicising this report, but the data is fixed. It's always on the 31st of March. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I'm sorry if it's a bit complicated.
I thought last night when I was reading it.
Yes, yeah. So I think August and March have been interchanged, and they shouldn't have. So I apologise for that. So what will happen is, provided you're happy, Richard will go ahead and make sure that they're both put online on Monday and properly publicised on that date.
Thank you, Richard. So I think it's obvious with 3 or 4 females joining the senior leadership team, that will clearly have a significant impact on the gender pay gap. I know there's not a legal requirement for the authority to provide the mean, but do we record the mean of the gender pay? So that is the average female gender pay and the average male, because that's actually maybe a more meaningful measure.
We don't, as you say, we're not required to do that, but my discussions with finance are that we can probably go into more detail and provide more reasoning behind the changes. And that's something we're going to be looking into over the next sort of 3 to 6 months. So yes, we want to be able to tell more of the story about that pay gap and why the changes have occurred. Certainly we're trying to get some more narrative for the December meeting.
Thank you.
Also, can I just draw your attention, paragraph 5.3, what we've proposed is that previously we've made an agreement at your meeting in March to amend the pay policy statement to bolt onto it this data. What I'm suggesting is that we keep the two separate in future, because actually they are separate. So you have your pay policy statement which you approve around March each year, and then this pay gap statement is issued after the snapshot date, which will probably be in the June meeting. But I think that pay policy statement goes into a lot more detail, Adam, so I think that might well answer your question about the mean figures. So I think that's probably more captured there, if I'm not wrong. I'll try to go from memory.
Yeah, I had a couple of points. One was actually related to what Adam just suggested. I know that the plurality of our female staff are in the lower quartile, lowest quartile, which presumably reflects the nature of the jobs that they do in the organisation. The other thing I was going to note is that each of these reports, say that on page 3 of each of the reports, it refers to methodology and calculations, and it says, if you'd like to read more about that, you can find detail on pages 3 and 4 of last year's gender pay gap report, but you actually have to go back to the one that was published in 2018 to find that methodology pay gap.
Would you like it included in the report?
Yeah, it should be refreshed each year. So the methodology needs to appear in each report. Yeah. We'll take that, Lisa. Thank you for that.
Any further comments? Okay,
So the resolutions you're being asked, members, are to note the content of the gender pay gap reports for 2020 and 2021 and to approve the publications of the gender pay gap reports for both 2020 and 2021.
everybody happy with that?
Okay.
Thank you, Richard. Yes, appreciate it. So next item is we're going back to item 10, which is injury settlements 2020 to 2021, lessons learned and action taken. I believe that that's Stacey.
Simon Beggett, I'll just come clean her.
Yeah, she does it every time, yeah.
Thank you for that. We were trying to run two items together at the same sense, so we do the same we do too. Maybe a couple of interruption. Just make it easier. So your first one is about the injury settlements.
Yes. So apologies firstly, I know members and requested in June that I'll come back and share some lessons learned around some of the information in my June paper on the number of settlements and claims that we have. I've not specifically detailed any lessons learned or actions in relation to singular or individual claims. The reason for that is obviously the sensitive nature around personal injury claims, and they are quite varied, so the lessons learned aren't necessarily kind of grouped into a specific category or specific learning step. So what I've tried to do in my paper a little bit is to focus more into the process of incident investigation and our claims handling process. I think in general, a lesson learned that we'll take from any personal injury claim or settlement is that we consistently review our health and safety management system, which I've outlined previously is around our system that's built in the line to the Health and Safety Executives HSE 65 model, which is around demonstrating overall compliance to health and safety, statutory and best practice in general. So with every personal injury claim that we might be in receipt of, what we'll always do as a standard is to look at our policies, our procedures, our processes, and any training and supervision that accompanies that, and just make sure there's no gaps in our knowledge and understanding around, ensuring compliance with health and safety statute. So I hope that kind of clarifies the point and the context and the scope of the paper. So just taking you through, I wanted to provide you with a bit of background information. So I'm just looking at section 3, titled Background in my paper. I've just discussed there a little bit our system called Ocean's Well Worker. That is our incident reporting system. So it's a system that all staff use to report any work-related incident. We've had that system since 2007, so over 10 years now. And it's what we call an occupational health and safety management system. So it's really designed to capture any safety-related incidents in the workplace. It's had reasonably minimal upgrades since we've purchased it, although we've done some work since 2019 to try and increase the functionality of that system and its wider use across the organisation. In terms of the future of that system, so I'm just moving now to some key considerations within my paper. As I said there, it hasn't had a lot of development. That's mostly by the provider of the system. But in recent years, our use as an organisation of that system has increased quite exponentially, and that has evolved to include wider business functions. It doesn't now just record safety incidents, it can record everything down to sort of data protection, breaches and incidents of that nature. So the system itself, because it's not been designed necessarily to handle the kind of scope of incidents that we have, a lot of the administration of the system is very manual and requires a lot of my team to run a lot of manual reporting functions on the system, which generally adds kind of the day-to-day work of monitoring incidents as they come in. So it's workable, but I think in the longer term, what we're looking to do is upgrade or replace the Ocean's Well Worker system with something that's a little bit more suited to our business needs and is a little bit more automatic in terms of how it assigns and notifies us of incidents. It's not a problem for us at the moment, but generally we'd like to do in about 18 months, 2 years' time, replace that system. The reason we've not done it sooner is because for a couple of reasons. Obviously we're going through transformation, so if we change out any system, we want to be mindful of other business functions and business areas where we might want to do a shared system and share that data. It's also a significant project because we've got over 10 years worth of data on that system, and we're required to hold that data for quite a period of time, so it means integrating that data into the new replacement system. So that's just a little bit about Ocean, so you get a bit of context there. And how it works in terms of workplace-related incidents is that generally, as soon as an incident is loaded onto the system, my team will automatically notify via email that we've had a workplace incident. I'm just moving on to the process now of initial investigation within my paper, that's section 5.2. So obviously it's essential that all workplace incidents are reported as they occur, and this enables us to establish root causes and any potential lessons learned. As a team, so my team, Health, Safety and Wellbeing team, will then work really closely with our responsible managers to review the incident and look at whether we've got suitable and sufficient control measures in place at preventing the reoccurrence of a similar incident. In terms of the types of incidents that we can report via the Ocean system, it's any work-related injury, work-related illness. As of 2019, we also have a category for work-related stress, Near misses, so those incidences that pose the potential of harm, so no injury or illness was occurred, but the potential harmful. Dangerous occurrences, these are dangerous occurrences as defined by the law regulations, the reporting of injuries, diseases and dangerous occurrence regulations. Security theft and data breaches, as I've already outlined. Road traffic collisions, and we can also narrow that down to road traffic collision with injury, and bullying, harassment and violence. So quite a wealth of work-related incidents are uploaded to our system. Obviously, upon receiving a notification of an incident, a member of my team will make an assessment of the severity or potential severity of that incident. And what we will do is take steps to then work with individual parties involved to undertake an investigation supported by the responsible manager or subject matter expert will be assigned to undertake that investigation. Obviously, as a team, we will also make an assessment as to whether we feel that that particular incident meets the reporting requirements of the regional regulations, and a member of my team will then make a report to the Health and Safety Executive if we feel that that incident meets that reporting requirement. I have a member of my team, we've got a recently appointed Senior Health, Safety and Wellbeing Advisor. It is their responsibility to oversee all of our incident investigations as they come in through the Oceans Wellbeing System. And what they do is they monitor, they review and they quality assure our investigations to make sure that the evidence that we gather around the incident is accurate and a true reflection of events. They provide technical support and guidance to our incident investigators, and they also conduct a level of trend analysis, so they review the different types of incidents that we have on the system and just establish some formalised reporting. So that's important that we're looking at our root causes and any organisational-wide learning from our workplace incidents. So that's generally how we handle investigations as they come in. In terms of the claims handling procedures, that's a slightly different obviously, process, and I'm now referring to section 5.6 of my report. Essentially, it should be noted that all injuries or illnesses may not result in an injury claim, and this includes significant incidents such as lost time incidents, so those incidents that are work-related and may require an employer or person to have one or more days away from the workplace. Furthermore, not all personal injury claims will correspond with a singular incident, particularly where long-term exposure is concerned. So, for example, if we have a person that's exposed to asbestos fibres, it might be 30 to 40 years before they start showing signs or symptoms of asbestosis. And that might not be linked to one singular exposure event, that could be continuous exposure or various modes of exposure. So it's important to note that claimants have 3 years to log a personal injury claim from either the date of confirmed or diagnosed injury or the date and confirmed of diagnosis of illness. So then when you've got your longer term illnesses like asbestosis, that is the time then from diagnosis. They have 3 years to lodge their claim. Upon receiving a personal injury claim, and we usually receive notification of a claim via a letter that's received on behalf of the claimant's legal representatives, my team will take steps to, number one, obviously inform our insurers as soon as we're made aware, and that might be either through Bristol City Council, who acts as a claims adjuster on our behalf. We'll also then notify the Director of Service Delivery Support, so Simon in this case, that we received a claim and what the nature of the claim is, and that we've informed our insurers. We then will also notify the services clerk and monitoring officer, who in turn will work to support me and my team to ensure that we provide all the relevant information to our insurer and our insurer's legal representatives. And then if need be, then what we will always do is look at the original incident investigation. We will make sure that it has everything we need to provide our insurer and legal representatives with. We will reopen an investigation just to make sure that we can ascertain any further findings or analysis that might be relevant to support our defence of the claim. And then we will just simply look towards the root cause analysis conducted as part of the investigation to again decipher whether we need to put in place any additional preventative or corrective control measures within our safe systems of work and our management system. And this may well involve us working closely with managers to draft suitable action plans. The Oceans World Working System does have a module called Action Tracker, which allows us basically to create action plans on the basis of any findings where we feel that further action or corrective measures need to be put in place. We can assign an appropriate action owner and make sure that they do that within the prescribed time frame. So just moving on to trend analysis and lessons learned. So again, here looking at section 510 in my report. Obviously, upon the conclusion of our incident investigations and any root cause analysis conducted, my team will discuss lessons learned with responsible managers. We use an informal fair culture assessment, and just for your awareness, I attached the Health, Safety and Wellbeing Department strategy to my paper today. There is a copy of the fair culture assessment in the department strategy if you did want to refer to it. So we undertake the assessment, and the process of doing that is really not just to focus on individual behaviours where necessary to look at those organisational-wide root causes and learnings. Where we feel that it's important and appropriate to share the learnings of an investigation, my team will take steps to issue an organisational fire alert or other communication to our staff, just to sort of share what's happened, any corrective measures put in place, and any general learning. Obviously, where we know trends between any incidents or any claims that we receive, then I will discuss this with the Director of Service Delivery Support, and where necessary we might well review our corporate risk rating in the corporate register just to make sure that's a true reflection of where our corporate risk sits in terms of health and safety. And then again, we will look at our health and safety management system and just have a look at the work that me and my team do as part of our department strategy, what we are going to focus on in the coming months ahead, and how we're going to balance that work between team members. So in terms of incident investigation, like I said, we've had recently, as early as at the beginning of 2021, we have now a senior health, safety and wellbeing advisor in post. That was previously a practitioner's role that had been vacant for some time. So it's great now to have that post and have the capacity within the team to start looking at our incident investigation procedures again and the training package that we have in place for our incident investigators, and that's something that we're looking at again in 2022. Again, I spoke very briefly there about the panel of learning. Again, what we're trying to establish here is a fair culture, not a blame culture here at Avon, and we're very much looking at moving forward to the concept of a panel of learning. This is something that we haven't got in place at this moment in time, but I'm looking to develop for our investigative procedures in 2022. The concept of a panel of learning is the process that follows an incident investigation. It's where we sit together with the right stakeholders and we'll discuss any wider areas of development around our management system. So that's something that we do at the moment, but it's a bit more informal. So we'd like to do that on a more formal platform going forward. Obviously, just moving to section 514 of my report, we obviously do continue to strive to work closely with Global Insurance, and we do meet with FRIC, for example, on a pretty regular basis. As of recently, we've also been granted access to FRIC's claims portal, so we now have oversight of any ongoing claims. We also notify when claims may be settled or if there's any other information that's required in support of the claim. As I've outlined there, we obviously strive to continue to review our corporate risk register in respect to any claims received and any lessons learned from incident investigations. Finally, just to conclude really in terms of legal and policy implications, obviously we're aware that being unable or limited when defending against personal injury claims can obviously place the organisation at risk of accepting liability, particularly in relation to any subsequent claims of a similar nature, and in addition to an increased likelihood of enforcement action and prosecution if non-compliance is ascertained by regulatory bodies. So again, that's back to my first point really on the paper, that with any claim it's important for us to look at our health and safety management system, our policies, our procedures, all the things that we put in place to monitor health and safety performance as a whole across the organisation, really to kind of refine our compliance and our defensibility. So that's my first point. Thank you. Thank you. Questions?
All right, so we're going to get away from not being ourselves. So I've understood all of that and I understand the part about the software package doesn't meet the requirements. and maybe I'm wrong, but it sounds like the process is quite driven by the software. So these are not your words, but me just kind of referring back to what you said. It's not fit for purpose, right? So do you feel that the process currently, removing the software restrictions, is fit for purpose?
Yeah,
Yes.
I think if we could improve the software, I think that's only going to support the process in terms of our turnaround time of where we allocate incident investigations, because obviously that will be quicker if it's automatically allocated. And certainly we've got a software that gives us the wealth of functions that we'd like, and all that will really do is improve our reporting capability, I think. You know, if we're able to run more automated reports earlier on, we might get a greater indication of any, you know, trends as they unfold. So I think the process is fit for purpose. It just means we're having to, you know, manage that quite manually at the moment, which is, you know, not to be designed, but it is something we can cope with for the interim period.
And then the pattern of learning, thank you. So the pattern of learning, does that sit, is that any frequency, or does that sit when you identify some, when there is a learning to be shared?
At the moment, it's done on where we feel, particularly for those more severe incidents, where we feel like a panel of learning would be beneficial. Going forward, if we find that's a more formalised process, it might be that we need to have them in at a regular, you know, time frame, because that's something, depending on how many incidents we have, that we need to have those meetings. But it just generally is driven by the severity of the incident, or because at the end of the day, it's taking that practical approach of, you know, when we hold those meetings. But yes, certainly, at the moment it's more ad hoc, but like I said, going forward with our processes, we might want to put that in as something more frequently occurring.
And then, so you assign the task to somebody, don't you? When you identify there's a procedural change required, you identify. How is that? I appreciate your following up with that individual to say you were assigned this task, has this been completed? And so somebody could easily say, yes, I've now written a handling document, just for argument's sake. So that, from a spreadsheet perspective, is a tick. And so that would be arguably deemed a task completed. But creating a policy doesn't change the handling, you know. So how much do you follow that assignment of the task? Do you see what I mean? Do you understand what I'm trying to?
If you just referring back to the start of our home, there's something called the action tracker module. So what we will do is, particularly for those instances that were a very full investigation, it's normal that a member of my team is assigned to support that investigator, so we can't do it like coaching the investigator, because it can be difficult to gather all the information you need if it's quite a complicated investigation. And then what we'll do is draft an action plan with that person, and then we'll pop it onto the OSHA system. Now they can't sign an action off without our agreements, because we open that for them, we're notified if they try and close it. So then what we'll do is we'll go in and make sure that they've got evidence to show what they've done and how they've done it. So they can't close that out without us being satisfied. Does that make sense? So
Yeah, that makes sense.
from that perspective, it's not just a generic spreadsheet we're able to take.
No. I wasn't trying to imply a spreadsheet.
Yeah, so that will automatically tell us, and then if we're dissatisfied with what they've done, then we can next time reopen the action and have that discussion with them as to what we think is the right measures that need to be put in place.
Thank you.
I've got a question. It's not directly related to your accident role, but it is to do with the health, safety and wellbeing strategy attached. And on what page this is, it's a pen, but not in this series. Appendix 1 in here, and it's not fitness and physical well-being. It's obviously coming out in years of what we're expecting to do in those years. Now, I'm a bit surprised because the last one on that one page, and I picked this up purely random, work closely with watch management teams and station crews to explore healthy eating options and alternatives for meals cooked on station. Includes working on education videos and training on nutrition across the service. Why are we not looking at to 2025?
Well, I think we do that already, but I think what we'd like to do is to do a bit more of a wider campaign and to pick that up as part of a that's more of that, it's part of that, and you're open to getting also, nutritionists, key speakers and things like that. That's why we're kind of looking at it at a later date, but we already do some of that work, but that's more kind of giving it a bit of a platform, if that makes sense.
It just seems a long time to wait 4 years.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? I think as a team we've got quite a large unit in terms of health, safety and wellbeing. There's some things in that strategy that we do need to prioritise first, which is our general compliance, things like management and policy polish, that sort of thing. So as much as the fitness is really important to us, there's other areas around our fitness standards that we sort of need to just firm up first before we do that kind of preventative promotional piece.
It's quite an extensive work programme.
It's on there, it's just I'm worried about the time. I'm going to be revisiting to check.
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
things earlier.
Yeah, I mean, our plan is to revisit the strategy yearly, but obviously things can change in 6 months with the team. Sometimes I think we're also really privileged in that we have our mental health, fitness and health provision all in one. So sometimes as we go through this process of doing some of those initial packages, we can actually pick up some of the more preventative pieces that we're going to focus on maybe a little bit later, earlier, and encompass it in one work package. So I think it's kind of, as it evolves, we will pick things up, but because we're able to kind of come at this, as a team, it just naturally falls out some of the initial work we're already doing, to be honest.
Brenda, for the minutes, what page were you looking at?
It doesn't actually have a page number, unfortunately. That's what I was asked.
Okay, so if you go to that page,
The tiny little one is hidden in the red banner, every page.
37, I have on my
I think we started at
27 or
37. It's very small, it's hidden.
yes, I read it.
okay, that's
Printed,
fine.
yeah.
I just thought it might be needed for minutes.
Yeah. No, that's fine. Okay, any more comments?
Just a couple of typos in the strategy paper. KPI 2 refers to reducing the number of vehicle incidents that AFRS is involved in by 5% by 2020.
Oh, okay.
So that's
Apologies, yeah.
And then under KPI 4, there's typo where among is spelled an extra U.
No, thank you for being aware of that. That's important.
The one thing I was slightly unsure about, or cost gave me pause when I was reading it, was in the fair culture flowchart,
Okay.
and it specifically mentions suicide under one of the category where actions are intended and consequences intended, and there's sabotage in the detail, sabotage, malevolent damage, and then suicide. That just felt to me a little bit out of place, especially as next to that. There's talk about time disciplinary policy.
I mean, I think we definitely need to kind of refer that. I mean, what the top of the chart is referring to is things outside of the organisation's control. With the best pillars as well, the concept of the fair culture is really just focusing on actually what we as an organisation can do to prevent this. I think the majority of workplace incidents are often resulting from just genuine errors, mistakes, lapses in judgment. They can also result from limitations in policy and training and supervision. There is just the top of that though, which I find that there are very few enlightenment activities which behaves like violence and things like that.
It just jumps out.
Yeah.
So the recommendations, the committee is asked to note the claims handling procedures utilised for Avon Fire Rescue Service, to note the current process for lessons learned from personal injury claims, and to note the proposed developments and enhancements concerning the health and safety management system, incident investigation procedures, and the corresponding training packages.
Everybody happy with that? Right, the next one is report number 12, which is on page 55. And that's the trauma risk incident management. So I think that's about 2 of them, isn't it?
Yeah, so Yeah, the second paper I have for you today is for risk incident management, which is commonly referred to as TRIM, for lots of good reasons. It's quite a long title. So essentially, I've come back really to the committee to talk a little bit about, the number of TRIM referrals we have made in the last 12 months. I just want to stipulate that TRIM is just one of the mental health and wellbeing support provisions that we offer here at Avon. And what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about today is, as much as giving you the kind of figures around the number of referrals and the types of support we provide, I also accept I probably haven't explained before about how TRIM is actually administered and managed. So essentially, we have the Health and Wellbeing Advisor post now in the organisation. We've got one permanent advisor and they've been in post now for just over 2 years. It's our Health and Wellbeing Advisors that administer TRIM and they run TRIM on the day-to-day. As of December 2020, we also employed a secondary Health and Wellbeing Advisor but on a temporary basis. That was really in response to increasing demand on mental health support provisions in the pandemic, as much as just generally trending increase in support for mental health and wellbeing support services. So bringing our additional advisor now into the general mental health provision framework, we are able to really take a closer look at TRIM, because TRIM is administered through 2 primary support functions. Previously, with just a single health and wellbeing advisor, they kind of did both. So having 2 of them, we're able to split out that support provision a little bit better and to kind of follow up on the workload a little bit more intensively than we did previously. So like I said, there's 2 main support functions. First of all, we have the TRIM manager, and they're generally responsible for overseeing the day-to-day administration of TRIM in terms of our TRIM practitioners, and I'll explain who they are in a moment, and how, if they've got enough training, and how TRIM is delivered to staff and different staff groups across the organisation. And then we also have our TRIM coordinator, and they're generally responsible for picking up referrals made through, so we've got a dedicated TRIM box, and then sending practitioners out to station and providing some general welfare support. As a reassurance, both our health and wellbeing advisors are trained to a TRIM manager level, so that's a BTEC level. So if one advisor is not available for one reason, they can both assume the role of a TRIM manager and TRIM coordinator. But for the purposes of day-to-day, we normally split those 2 functions out slightly separately. So like having both those advisors there has really meant that we can ensure that all staff across the organisation can access TRIM as needed, and our response time to sending TRIM practitioners out to stations pretty quick in the sort of first 24-48 hours after an incident. What we're hoping to do now as a team is to look at providing refresher training to our TRIM practitioners. For some of our practitioners, they've now been in post for well over 2.5 years, so they are now due for their refresher training. We have some budget allocated for that, and the first course we're hoping to run is next month, provided everything goes well. And then we've also allocated some funding for next year to look to provide initial practitioner training for more staff to become TRIM practitioners. So we have a reasonable provision of practitioners at the moment, but some of our practitioners, it's a role they volunteered to do. So over the last 2 years, they've kind of reflected whether they still think that's something they would like to be involved with, or whether it sits well with their role within the organisation. So we've had some practitioners say they'd like to continue with that. We've also naturally had some people say that that is not a role or function they wish to fulfil anymore. So we need to ensure that we continue training more staff to make sure we have enough practitioners available to support. So I'm just moving to key considerations in my report. Really, I just again wanted to highlight the different types of TRIM support that we offer. So I've described in my paper something called a TRIM offer and what that means. So essentially, that is where we are notified of any potential incidents that are potentially traumatic. And then essentially on the back of that information, we will reach out and offer support to staff members involved in that particular incident. So what we have and how we get this information is we get a daily report which is run by control, and they will flag incidents using the trauma indicators that we provided to us to alert us first thing at the start of the day if they believe anything to come in that needs actioning or addressing. Managers can also refer staff to trim, and staff can also self-refer. So we aren't just dependent on that information from control. That's also a really helpful function because to control our oversight of our incidents as they come in, essentially. What do we consider as traumatic? Or we're constantly adding, to be honest, to the list of descriptors we use as traumatic because it is dependent and situation dependent. There's obviously any incidents that involve fatality or multiple fatality. It's any incidents that involve children or vulnerable members of the community. It's incidents that involve suicide or self-harm, and incidents that involve animals. And so that's just a few examples, but the list is actually quite substantial. So upon receiving that, then what we will do is we'll reach out, and if staff come back to us and say, yes, I would like some trim support, please. We have two mechanisms of providing trim support. First and foremost is we always do what's known as a trim briefing. It's commonly referred to on station as a tip. We will then organise to go out. We will send a practitioner, and the practitioner who has been trained in trauma risk management will sit with the watch or team concerned, and what they'll do is they'll talk a little bit about normal reactions to a traumatic event, how to recognise the signs and symptoms in yourself or colleagues of trauma, and what we can do if you feel that you're exhibiting these signs and symptoms, where you can get wider mental health support. These sessions are often run up such small groups with the team or the watch. They are incredibly popular, to be honest, because I think people feel supported by their peers, supported by their colleagues, probably more so than the next form of support that we provide, which is called a trim assessment. So often, sometimes on the back of a briefing, some staff members may approach the practitioner and say, I would like a trim assessment. A trim assessment is more one-to-one with the practitioner. That's a formalised assessment where they go through and will talk about the individual's experience of that event themselves, how they're feeling about it, what they plan to do in terms of coping mechanisms, and again, re-inciting and signposting into other support services where relevant. So that's really the trim assessment. What we will naturally do after 28 days is we follow up with a second trim assessment with that individual. So we can say to them, how are you feeling about this now? How do you feel? Has that changed? Is there any other support? Because naturally, after about 28 days, most people will maybe exhibit some of those signs of trauma and stress related to the incident. Not always, but usually that's the general time frame. So that's the difference between a trim briefing and a trim assessment. Like I said, that a trim practitioner is a member of Avon Fire Authority who has been trained in providing trauma risk management support. So they're trained to recognise signs and symptoms of trauma, trained how to provide trauma briefings, trauma assessments, and how to follow up and signpost to wider mental health and wellbeing support services. Just going down to section 5.2 of my report for trim support referrals made in the last 12 months. In terms of trim offers made, I've provided the last quarter for a bit of comparison to the last 12 months. We've had 42 trim offers made in the last quarter, so it's quite a few. In the last 12 months, we have had 201 or over 201 referrals now for trim offers made. I think it's important to outline that of those 201 that we've made in the last 12 months, we had at least 45 that were related to the Wessex water explosion over at Avon. That was quite a significant incident for me and my team to coordinate. We had some really positive feedback from staff who were involved in that incident and received trim support, and said that they feel well supported on that incident. That was complicated and it was quite a large response. In terms of trim briefings, in the last quarter we provided 4, and in the last 12 months we provided 18 trim briefings. And as I said, their trim assessments slightly less common because I think most people tend to favour the support provided at the briefing. We haven't had any in the last quarter, but we've provided 8 trim assessments in the last 12 months. And that's initial assessments, obviously we will then follow up with a secondary assessment. In terms of staffing groups, accessing trim support is still very much weighted towards our operational staff. Our firefighters are about 90%. However, the remaining 10% includes direct support for control staff and our teams who work with community safety disinfection. So again, it's still weighted towards operational, but obviously all staff can access trim, and we're doing a lot of the work to promote trim to our corporate support service staff as well, so they can access it if needed. Obviously, just moving on to section 5.3 in terms of comparisons we make with other fire and rescue services. As a health, safety and wellbeing team, we're always seeking to benchmark ourselves with other fire and rescue services, and especially our trauma support and management. At the moment, we're taking a closer look at Devon and Somerset's support model. It's known as diffusing. Essentially, that really sits on the same principles as TRIM, really, but it's more dependent on peer-to-peer support. As a team, we're not looking at moving to a diffusing model because we've had nothing but positive feedback from our provision of TRIM practitioners and staff being supported by having trained staff there really to guide them through the TRIM process. However, there are elements of the diffusing model that we feel that we could actually adopt in our own TRIM process, that kind of peer-to-peer supervision. And we think this model could be quite effective in control, for example, where how they might respond to a traumatic incident or their experience of traumatic incidents may well look very different to staff that are out there on the incident foreground. And also their time that they may take away from the control room and how they access that support may look different. So maybe elements of the diffusing model might be something we wish to adopt within TRIM going forward. And finally, there's no immediate risks to note associated with the paper that I've provided today. Essentially, as a team, we continue to keep looking at what we call our safe operating procedures, which detail our referral and triage process in full TRIM, as much as any of the wellbeing support services that we offer. And we make sure that we have sustained effort to consult with our staff on any key updates or improvements or changes we make to our wellbeing support, and TRIM included there. We do ensure that a health and wellbeing advisor or another member of the health, safety and wellbeing can sit on things like the staff engagement network meetings, so we're very much prominent there in talking about all the different wellbeing support and TRIM included. So that's it.
Thank you very much. Questions?
Stan.
Can I just ask about the uptake? So appreciate that the research takes different ways. You've done this international benchmarking. The 4 TRIM briefings have been taken up of 42 offers. Doesn't sound like a lot. I don't know, are we happy, are we comfortable with that level of take-up, or,
I think we're comfortable in that. I think before bringing in TRIM onto that provision wasn't there. It's still a new provision, so we are constantly trying to see what that looks like on a year-to-year basis. I think in a way it can be seen as a positive incentive. When we speak to staff, they are got their own wellbeing awareness. They're already engaging maybe with other support provisions or preventative support and creeping mechanisms, which is a great thing, obviously. We'd obviously like to see more staff access the service, but that is a difficult thing because as much as we might earmark an incident as traumatic, to the individual, they might not well see that as traumatic. That's their own experience. And a lot of staff will say to us, sometimes it's not always the incidents that you think are going to be traumatic or the ones that cause concern. And that's where we're constantly looking at refining our other wellbeing support provisions and services so that we can access those. Does that kind of make sense? It's a difficult figure to kind of comprehend, but I think certainly the more that we can look at other staff groups like control, we might also see greater uptake of TRIM providing their things that they can access that support provision.
Thank you, Susie. That's been really fascinating. I really didn't know that service is there. So, thank you.
So as a committee, we're being asked to note the findings outlined in this report concerning the trim referral process and the total number of referrals which have been made. You're happy to know that? Yeah. Okay. Super. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm sorry about the minutes.
I did my best. I did quite a job.
Good afternoon, elected members. I'm here this afternoon. Oh, sorry, not to say I'm laughing, that's my first mistake of the afternoon. I'm here this afternoon to update you on my paper that I submitted on human resources and particularly focusing on the recruitment update. So I briefed you before in terms of our whole-time firefighter recruitment. You'll be aware from other fire authority meetings that this has mainly been triggered by our immediate detriment. Cases of a number of staff that are approaching retirement age. We're losing an awful lot of experience from the service in the next few months. What we've done is we've got far more attuned to our succession planning than we had before. We've got a lot more data now on the age profile of the organisation, so we can really accurately map ahead to see how many new recruits we might need. So you'll see some of the figures that I've given you in the paper around the number of applicants that we've had in the diversity profile of those applicants. You will remember from the briefing that I gave you previously that we decided to eliminate the criteria of having to have a full driving licence. I think elected members were quite interested in that because they see what impact that might have. Unfortunately, it didn't have a significant impact in increasing the number of people from a BAME community, so I think that was unfortunate. However, what it did do is, no doubt, it helped to attract people from more sort of maybe socially deprived areas, backgrounds where people maybe couldn't afford to have a driving licence. And it is actually very expensive, and I think also at the moment there's quite a considerable waiting list of people during the pandemic when they weren't able to have driving lessons and go to the theory test. That was also, so it definitely has attracted people who wouldn't have had previously, and also for those that live in particularly in central Bristol, that normally can rely on public transport. So I think that's definitely had a positive impact for us. It's just maybe not in the areas that we would have liked. So there's some work that we need to do to have a look at that, to see if there are some other changes we need to make to further improve the diversity profile, particularly from our underrepresented groups, from the sort of African Asian community, particularly in the central Bristol area. So you'll see that we're taking on, now it's been confirmed that hopefully we will have 48 new recruits. They'll be spread in 2 training schools, so from January and April of next year. And my department are currently working on the top performing candidates and putting them through the medical process and the pre-appointment checks at the moment. So you'll see the diversity profile. We've done quite well with the females. We've got 6 females, which represents 15% of the intake. Unfortunately, 1 from a black and ethnic minority background, so that isn't as high as we would have liked. We definitely need to do some more work in that area. We're already starting to look at our next campaign for next year and what we can do more. We've been doing positive action and community outreach for many years now, but it's maybe not having the desired outcomes. So I've just been talking, you had a presentation earlier from Richard Stokes, who's the head of diversity, and we've been looking at whether we can look more at mentoring programs. So people from a black background, ideally both genders, who are really open to thinking about a career in the fire service, that we work very much closely with them. So maybe we take 5-10 people each that we work with over a period of time and help coach and mentor them and develop them to actually becoming a firefighter and competing next year. We work very closely with Bristol City Council. We work with the Stepping Up group that you may have heard, which is very much a career development pathway for people from black and Asian backgrounds. It's really looking at how we can do more to further increase those numbers. From LGBT background, we've got 4 new recruits in that top 40, and that's really positive. A lot of people have been very cautious about disclosing sexuality to us before, and quite often people didn't wish to disclose that. I think what we've tried to do is a lot of work to encourage people to disclose that and say, actually, we are a safe place for people to work, and actually, if people do disclose that information to us, it really helps us to give them any support that they may need within the organisation. So for me, that was really positive. We've also got some people that are currently on hold because we know that sometimes people fail the medicals. So we've got another group of 9 candidates on hold. One of them is female and 2 in LGBT background. So unfortunately, I can't tell you what the final figures will look like because we're still going through the pre-appointment checks. I can definitely update you at the next meeting. In terms of other recruitment, you'll be aware that we've also looked at making sure we have opportunities for our on-call staff to transfer across into the whole-time firefighting. That's been they're part-time, they give an awful lot to us, they've got a primary job, and they also give a lot of their time as working on call, and also got family and caring commitments. So it feels like the right thing to do. And we've got 6 of those that have gone through the process that have been successful, and they will be starting as full-time firefighters on the 4th of October. They will also probably, most of them will carry on doing their on-call cover, albeit on a slightly reduced level of cover. We still keep them on those on-call stations, but just on slightly less cover, so we get both benefits there. The other thing that we've done is because, I think it's been explained to you previously, it takes quite a long time to recruit firefighters from externally in the community, and also to develop and train them before they become fully competent. So we put an advert out on the National Fire Chiefs Council website quite some time ago, and that's left as an open advert. And we had about 30 applications through for people who were competent firefighters who were interested in transferring into Avon. I think a really positive thing I need to tell you is that a lot of those candidates have said to me they might actually live and work in their home service at the moment, but they've done some research on Avon and they actually were very much attracted to moving. So even if it was a longer journey time, they actually felt that they wanted to come and work at Avon for various reasons, including potential for career development and some of the the assets that we use and the specialist equipment that we have, and they felt that would be a far more rounded and exciting work. I think particularly some of the stuff we've done in the pandemic, working with SWAS, etc. So I think that's really, really positive things that people are wanting to come and work in Avon, even if that actually isn't their local fire and rescue service. So we gave priority to people who are qualified drivers, because we've got a shortage of drivers at the moment on station. And again, we're still working on numbers. We've had a few unfortunately drop out more recently because some of them were looking to relocate to Bristol or Avon area, and sometimes that timeline has not worked exactly as they anticipated. So we've got definitely, we hope, about 11 that will be joining us on the 4th or the 11th of October. But I will give a caveat to that. The numbers seem to be changing almost by the hour, but the current picture is that we will have 11 that will be joining us on the 4th or the 11th of October. So it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour in terms of recruitment. I just wondered if you've got any questions before I move on to other areas.
I was actually, it's really here, I was actually going to ask you about what take-up is, do you think, for on-call firefighters to become more permanent and full-time? Is there an uptake?
So yes, so in terms of the transfer process, there were 21 that applied and 6 were successful in moving across. What we've also got is we need to not deplete the on-call workforce, we need to keep topping those up. Obviously that is absolutely vitally important for our more rural communities. So we've increased the number of places on the next on-call training school, which is in the middle of October, I think. And so we've got 11 places. So we're hoping so we'll be bringing 6 across to whole time, but we'll be keeping them also doing some reduced cover on-call, and then bringing a further 11 through. And that's something that we're keeping a watching brief on. But also because of, partly due to the pandemic, and also because we have got some vacancies at the moment, we also make sure that overtime is available to our on-call staff so they can work on whole-time stations, either for individual shifts or for whole tours if they're available to do overtime. And that really helps the workforce to work even more closely together, so on-call and whole-time working together on whole-time stations. And then we've just done something which is slightly different to us, and it was something that both the assistant chiefs suggested, which is to offer fixed-term contracts for old pool people to come across to see us over this period of time during the winter months where we've got some shortfalls. We've got definitely 2 old pool candidates who wish to come across and do a long-term contract initially for a 2-month period. That's mainly because they are engaged in the self-employed, they're doing seasonal work, so one of them is a tree surgeon, and he's actually said, right, I can very easily come across and do a couple of months for you whole time and still keep my own pool job on reduced cover and do some of my primary work. So it's looking after the well-being of them to make sure they're not trying to do too much. Also, I think that gives us really good opportunities, and it enables us, most importantly, to maintain that service to the community. Does that answer the question?
I was just pleased to see the numbers of LGBT families. That's nice to have that laid out, and good to see that we're attracting.
It's really important. It's something we're not nationally monitored on. So previously it's always been the focus has been on female and male candidates. I think it's definitely an area of importance for us. And we're also looking at for all staff that have become from underrepresented groups to put in place support networks. So forgive me if Richard may have already mentioned that as part of his update. But it's also looking to make sure that anybody that has an area of difference, that they do have that support network available to them if they have any issues during their employment with us. But I think that is a positive.
It's important that our workforce reflects the communities. Absolutely. Absolutely. Any other questions? Thank you, Karen. That's a long report.
Karen hasn't finished her report. She was just asking for questions.
I've read so much. My apologies. I'll whistle for the next bit, which is on attendance management. And again, this is something I've updated you on previously, so I don't want to repeat some of the previous updates I've given. So we've been working for over 18 months now on an attendance management working group to really look at everything that we do, our policy, our processes, some of the use of technology that we use for attendance management, to make it feel less tick-boxy. I think it tends to sometimes when you've got policies and processes, actually not putting the people at the front of it. So what we've been doing is working with employees across the organisation, through both the staff engagement network, trade unions and representatives from across the organisation. We've also looked at what the National Timesheet Council have done, and they've pulled together an attendance management policy which includes best practice which they've taken from all fire and rescue services across the country. So rather than us starting fresh, it seemed like a sensible place to start is to look at what the NMTC has done nationally and taking into account that best practice. Some of the things that we're doing may seem fairly minor, that return to work interviews, that's a phrase that's used across HR, generic insurance councils use that phrase. But what the employees have said, that an interview feels very formal. It feels that you're being punished. You come back from sickness and you've got to have an interview process, and it very much feels like we're just filling in the form, and it feels very, very formal, and you're not actually really caring about whether I'm well enough to be back at work or what the issues are. So we're changing that into a welfare check. But also we're not just wanting just to be budget, it's also training our managers and making sure that staff feel that we're actually putting them at the centre and really asking the right questions and putting tailored helpful support in place for them to enable them to ideally to remain at work and improve their attendance levels, but also to make sure that they're aware of all of the sources of help and support that's available. Because I think the thing is, we've got such a wealth of support that sometimes even line managers forget what's available. So it's making sure that it's much more intuitive, that staff can, particularly around the areas of mental health, also that staff may not feel comfortable in having those conversations with their line managers. So it's more intuitive that staff can access that help and support and know about that right at the outset. So I think in terms of short-term sickness, it remains at the lowest level for the past 10 years, which is really good news. However, that's caveated against the fact that all organisations are experiencing lower short-term sickness at the moment, largely due to the pandemic, less social interaction, more hygiene measures, etc. So all of the normal coughs, colds, stomach upsets, etc. They tend to have sort of abated somewhat over the last 18 months. But that is still good news. Obviously, we're keeping a watching brief on that to make sure that doesn't start to increase. Where we have got more of an issue is around long-term sickness. Again, we've got that 21 side of long-term sickness, and that tends to stay a very static figure. But in context, that's only 2.5% of the workforce. So I can assure you that we haven't got a problem about long-term sickness, but we do need to get much better at giving support at an earlier stage. Particularly, I think now that the NHS are under more pressure due to the pandemic, waiting lists are a lot longer, some staff aren't getting that help and support through the NHS. So you will see mentioned there the Medical Intervention Fund, which is a fund that the Fire Authority put in place many years ago, in response to that actually, it's right and proper that we can help to support people when they're waiting on NHS waiting lists. That could be anything from physiotherapy treatment all the way through to paying towards scans or indeed operations. Obviously, some of the private operations are very, very expensive, so we can pay the full cost, but sometimes we can pay a proportion of the cost. Obviously, that's very well received by the employee, and normally we try to do an analysis of saying, well, actually, if we pay that money out up front, enable them to access private treatment, how much quicker would they likely to be returning to work? So if they've got an NHS waiting list of 9 months, we know that investment of money, actually they're not paying sick pay for that period. So it's always like an investment to save. So whilst it can sometimes seem maybe not very efficient and effective, we always try and do a calculation to try and make sure that we can back up that and make sure we're using that money in a very efficient and effective way. In terms of counselling, we have had an increase in counselling over the last 18 months. Probably more counselling than we've ever had in the past in terms of our own probably external counselling. I think we can look at that in 2 ways. You could either say, actually, have we got a problem there, and do we need to look at that in more detail? But I think what a lot of employees are saying is that's partly been due to the pandemic and the added anxiety and stress, but also the fact that we're talking about it not both in society about mental health, but also within the organisation. I don't know whether elected members have seen this in the videos that we've done, some of the information that's on our staff website, but I think the assistant chief took part in one of our videos recently, along with a cross-section of staff across all of our organisation, and it's getting that conversation going. It's actually really, really important that our staff see that actually you've got the assistant chief talking about mental health and how important it is to have that conversation, but the firefighter, let's say, that sometimes maybe they didn't identify early enough that that was a problem for them to start that conversation going. So for me, I very much think that's a positive. I really like the fact that people are now accessing that help and support that's available to them. And I've actually then seen that there's actually been a reduction in short-term sickness as a result of mental health, but of course that's something that we'll carry on working with. We've also got 2 internal health and wellbeing advisors who focus on mental health. So they're also there to help and support people. And Stacey would have presented to you earlier on this afternoon and talked about some of the work that her team is doing. So in terms of long-term sickness, some of the other development work is to look at whether we can help and support people at an earlier stage, and also start to have the conversations that if somebody is potentially qualified for ill health retirement, so they're not well enough to come back to the workplace, we start to have those conversations at an earlier stage. I think what is great about Avon Fire Authority is we're a very benevolent employer, and we try to make sure that we put all of that help and support in place for employees before we even think about an exit in the organisation. But for some staff, we've actually felt that's been quite a pressure, that if they know that their health is so bad that they're not going to be able to return to work, they always want that decision to be made at an earlier stage so they can start to move forward and focus on what career would look like or life would look like away from making fire and rescue. So I think we've done it for the right reasons, but I think we will just be changing our approach over the next few months. So again, I'll pause there.
Yeah, just on that, often it is the uncertainty of their future can often be an additional contributor to somebody's well-being when they're in long-term sick, as Karen mentioned there. So as Karen said, often you see some disappointment and sadness if you have to make that very difficult decision that, is not going to return to work and there's no other option for us. But often then you see a sense of a bit of relief that, okay, now I can focus on what my next steps are in my life So it is a very fine balance, absolutely. And having chaired those meetings on many occasions, they are very, very, very difficult decisions because they're quite complex, in their uniqueness and individuality. But as Karen said there, often it can be a contributor the longer it goes on to someone's well-being, because the uncertainty, am I going to, be back to where I want to be, or is my health not allowing me to do that?
I think it's also because we have a legal duty to look at reemployment, and yet actually something that's not what we're trying to keep them in work, and maybe give them consider a different job in the Avon Fire Rescue Service. But actually sometimes they've been a career firefighter, the thought of doing a desk-based job, maybe working with somebody like me in HR, maybe isn't as that appealing to them, and actually sometimes maybe they would rather that decision and that help and that support. So we would also look then at career counselling, helping with CVs, all of those practical things to help it, a bit like they do in the military in terms of outplacement support, to help people to start to think more openly and positively about their future.
It's probably also put a closure that one stage is finished. Now we've got to start looking at the next bit as well. Getting rid of the uncertainty, am I not?
And the most important thing is being led by the employee, side of the community cases, it should be led by them and trying to take their views into account and work on to try and look at what would the next stage look like more there. So a couple of minor other updates for you. Just HR have been working with a couple of students from the University of West of England. I've got quite a long relationship with working with the HR team at UE. So I've got two students. One of them is working on a project based on the experiences of female operational staff within the organisation. And what we know from previous is that actually we have sometimes struggled to attract females into the operational role, but also to retain females. So I think it's really interesting to be able to have a safe space where actually this is a student coming and they're interviewing them completely anonymously. She will then present a report back. This is not talking to me or anybody else of the organisation. So what I hope is that will give some really interesting insights into the experiences of operational staff. And obviously we've also asked them questions. What could make a real difference to them? What could make the workplace even better for them? So I haven't had that report submitted back to us yet. It's due later on in the autumn. So that will be presented to SLB and SLT. And then what I hope is I can bring this back to the next meeting just to give you some highlights from that report and sort of the findings that she's made. The other report is based on mental health. And again, this one is looking at the difference in access, or is there a difference in access between our male staff and our female staff? Again, I think whilst we're doing a lot of work, I've just talked about some of the videos and the conversations and trying to raise that awareness, I still think in society, and probably within Avon Fire Rescue Service, females are more ready to talk about their mental health and access to help and support than men. So this is a piece of work that she's looking at is, again, are there some barriers in the way and are there some things that we could do differently to further encourage men to access mental health support. So I think that would be quite exciting project, so I look forward to bringing that to you next time around. And then finally, I mentioned earlier about the complexities of pensions and some of the impacts that it has, and for those of you that have had to read the papers on immediate detriment, I feel sorry for you. So you'll be pleased to know that we have a pensions advisor who will be starting in the human resources team later on in October. She's due to start on the 25th of October. She's got a wealth of experience in local government pensions, not so much in fire rescue service, but she did work in fire rescue service pensions many years ago, but really, really confident that she will give us that much needed technical expertise, and not just for us as fire authority members and for the HR team, but equally for our staff. A lot of staff are really struggling to make those decisions about the time, and they don't understand the pension estimates and all the complexities. And this is something that the unions have been asking for many years. So I think it's really, really good news, and I think it's a big thank you to SLB that found that funding to allow us to take on that additional role. So that's it from me, unless anyone's got any questions.
There's only one thing I needed to point out. So on page 59 of your bundle, which is the front page of Karen's report, I think some stray words were included in the subject line which shouldn't appear there. So it should just be HR recruitment update. If you have the words including menopause update, they should be deleted. That was actually covered by Richard Stokes in his strategy report. So we had agreed that that wording would be removed, but somehow it's ended up being incorporated into the bundle, for which I apologise, so we will delete those words.
Unfortunately, that would just thank you. And that was because Harrison last year asked about the work that we were doing.
Yes.
So we wanted to make sure we include it. So we tried to include it twice.
Yeah.
When you got it, I think you were just
I will not speak. And the committee is just simply asked to take this report.
Yes.
Any other questions? Or is
Okay, so it was such a comprehensive report to cover so many things. You should put your mask on. And the helicopter's gone too.
good to see you all again.
Thank you.
very much.
What are you doing?
Yes. Okay, item 14. Is this in public?
Yes, it is.
It is, right, okay, I'm just checking. Is item 14 on page 63 is about the recruitment of a substantive chief fire officer and chief executive officer. I'm sure it means fire officer rather than fire office.
Yes, I've got an R. Have you not got an R?
No.
Oh, okay.
I've just written my own arm.
Okay, all right. There's obviously an issue with version control at the moment, which I will look into. Okay.
No, I've got chief though.
Okay.
Also on the agenda.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yes, so you
Okay.
didn't have that, no. It definitely says office, fire office.
Okay. So, Chair and members, this is my paper to you. So, as I've said in the summary, the present Chief Fire Officer and Chief Executive, Mick Cronell, has announced his intention to retire, and I believe all members of the Fire Authority were informed of this last week when I was away on leave. And he will retire from his role with Avon Fire and Rescue Service on the 31st of March next year, which is after completion of the staggering 30 years pensionable service. So he's very kindly told us at a very early stage, and that's because the recruitment process itself is quite a protracted process. It's given us plenty of notice, which is good news. I'm going to come back to the recommendations in my report because I'm going to suggest a slight tweak to those recommendations. So I'll come back to those in a moment. So the background is, as I've said, Mick Cronell has announced his intention to retire. He's given us 6 months' notice, which allows us sufficient time not only for inviting applicants, recruitment and selection, but also sufficient time for a handover process as well, which I think is very important. So the Fire Authority Constitution, which as you know we refreshed this year, makes provision for all the members of the Fire Authority to determine whether to undertake the recruitment. Okay, so do we recruit someone is the decision of all the members of the Fire Authority, whereas the recruitment process itself is delegated to you as members of People and Culture. The Constitution then goes on to say that for this appointment, I take the lead, so that's why it's my paper, but I do that in consultation with Karen, the HR manager. So what you will see, which is slightly different from the process we've just been through from the assistant post, is that I will be more the person who's driving that process with support of HR, and I think we will have meetings on the run-up to that process to agree how we want to run it, okay? So the reason I suggested that there is a slight amendment to the recommendations, which I'll come to at the end, is I think we can speed up the process slightly to that suggested in one of the appendices, and that's the timeline of Appendix 1. So that's on page 67 of your bundle. And you will see what it presently says is that today we confirm the process and the documents, which are attached to this paper. And then we update all members at the next Fire Authority meeting on the 15th of October. And it's not until we've done that that we then release the advert. Now, the issue with that is the advert will then only be open for quite a short period, a couple of weeks. So what I'm going to suggest to you, and the reason I'm going to change the recommendations to incorporate this, is that I contact all members of the Fire Authority by email on Monday of next week, And I invite them to agree that we do go ahead with this process, because I don't think anyone's going to suggest that we don't. I think it would be completely illogical to do so. So simply say to them, are you happy for people and culture to start this process? And the benefit of that, and having a deadline by, say, the end of next week for responses from political leaders, is that we can get this advert up and live sooner rather than later. And I would suggest that the advert then runs for the increased period of 1st to the 29th of October, which is effectively the month of October. And that cannot be criticised on any front, because what it does is it opens the window, which potentially opens the pool of available people who would apply. So I think that's a pragmatic approach rather than waiting to the Fire Authority meeting on the 15th of October. So if I then continue with my paper, paragraph 3.5, you will note that the Chief Fire Officer, Chief Executive, is an established operational uniformed position as part of that structure, and therefore it requires the post holder to provide operational response cover. So whoever we appoint will form part of an operational rota to run major incidents if they should occur, which is why we're seeking an operational uniformed individual for this post. That person would also be subject to Gold Book terms and conditions of service. Turning to paragraph 4.1 of my report, it sets out the salary for the post, which was set a while ago when we appointed the current chief. And in fact, the salary at that stage was reduced to reflect the national average. And since that date, pay increments have only been those recommended by the National Joint Council for Brigade Managers, and we haven't had any local pay rises that we've agreed on top of those national announcements. And the pay policy statement, which is issued each year, sets out the Chief Fire Officer's salary and how that is affected by national pay increases. So key considerations for you, paragraph 5.1, we will be advertising the post nationally on the National Fire Chiefs Council website, which is where it gets the most, has the ability to attract the most applicants. There will be an application form and CV aligned to the National Fire Chiefs Council Leadership Framework and Behaviours. There will be psychometric profiling of every applicant, an executive leadership assessment, a staff engagement forum exercise, a stakeholder engagement exercise, an operational resilience exercise, and then yourselves as members of People and Culture, we will discuss the format of that committee in due course. I'll have to work out availability and get a panel that's available at every stage, because we don't want to change the members involved. But you will conduct the actual final bringing together of all that evidence and the final interview process. We will also, paragraph 5.3, conduct a shortlisting, so you decide who you want to bring forward for the interviews. And like I said, all the evidence that's been collected up until that point will be presented to you. So the anticipated timeline we will need to amend in paragraph 5.6 of the report if you agree with my suggestion, and that will be that the advert will go live on the 1st of October rather than mid-October, and will go live for 4 weeks rather than 2, but apart from that the rest of the timeline remains the same. So you have as the appendices the timeline which we've discussed amending, so the subject to members' agreement, the advert can go live earlier. You then have the job description and person specification of Appendix 2. And then Appendix 3 is the application form itself, which you will see is addressed to me as clerk of the Fire Authority. And then an Appendix 4 is the advertisement itself, which will be put online. So I don't intend to read out all those documents to you. You've had them and you've been exposed to this process quite recently. So do you have any questions for me, please?
I think it's very sensible to bring it forward. We want to get the best applicant we can.
Yes.
And potentially, if somebody was on holiday for 2 weeks, they
Yes.
might completely miss it. So
And I also think when you're talking about jobs at this level, drawing together your evidence and application process can take several weeks.
yes, exactly. Yeah. So I'm very happy with the process.
Did I read somewhere in this stuff that if we do not appoint someone, there's a problem.
So what we can do is we can make local temporary arrangements, but obviously we want to avoid that if we can. So we can, agree to put temporary cover in place, but you would want to get the appointment process.
I understand. I just thought I read it somewhere that there was a problem.
So with the recommendations, I would suggest slight amendment to those. So the recommendations are: one, that you confirm the outline, draft recruitment process, job description and personal specification, application form and advert for the role, which of those things appendix. B, that you appoint myself as clerk as your lead officer in consultation with the HR manager, and also appoint the current Chief Fire Officer as your technical advisor to the committee, because obviously he has that fire expertise that I don't have. I would then recommend that we add a C, which is in advance of the next Fire Authority meeting, the clerk approaches members for permission to start advertising for the post on the 1st of October. So that would be the addition to the recommendations. And then paragraph D will be amended then to say to update the Fire Authority on the recruitment process at the meeting on 15th of October. So for our minute taker, Steve, if you need me to clarify that wording, just let me know. So subject to the addition of a new C, which is that in advance of the meeting I will seek permission from members to place the advert early, and the D, we will update the Fire Authority on the 15th of October. Are you happy to approve those 4 recommendations?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. And as it's quite an important decision, maybe I could just have a proposer and a seconder.
I propose.
Adam. Super. So thank you very much, Ms. I think that concludes my paper. So the next item on the agenda is item 15, which is the date of the next meeting.
The proposal is 10th of December 2021 at 10:30.
The amendment.
It's for the next meeting.
10th of December.
I think we're still trying to clarify venues for all meetings. So I think the way that my clerk Emma has approached this is she's put placeholder invites into everybody's diaries, but maybe the venues will be updated. And the reason for that is we're still struggling with room capacity limits on rooms.
And given this is December, it might be.
Yes, it might be different.
Situations.
I'm just conscious that members are travelling to either here or even Mouth at the moment, and it might be we can use other
It's near
venues.
Christmas, so people are.
And some.
We like Avon. We like Avon.
I like some part
With a Portishead in.
Yeah. Okay, is everybody happy with that? Okay, thank you. So I think that's the end of the meeting, so I'll go and turn off the recorders. Thank you.